Hello everyone, this is update for October 17, 2022, day 236 of the war, end of the date update. So today, again, it's going to be more focused, it's going to be short and it's going to be more focused on the general strategic situation and developments as opposed to the situation on the ground, as essentially there are no changes, nothing major is happening. We kind of have this kind of like in the eye of the storm, where both sides are preparing for decisive actions. Um, Now let's start from sort of general strategic situation. Is Russian military command continues their attacks against Ukrainian infrastructure. Some of them successful, some of them not. But that's sort of part. It's sort of part of the strategy that obviously many of this Shahid 136 are going to get shut down. But at the same time, some of them will hit the target, and eventually, after waves after waves, the goal will be achieved. That's sort of basic strategy of the Russian command. Um, in terms of like, if let's say we discuss like, okay, is this truly something difficult that cannot be shut down, that you cannot have effective defense against it? That is actually not true. It's actually a disgrace that Ukraine does not have effective anti-air defense, because those are very primitive devices, and the only reason they are so successful is because Ukrainian military is so weak in terms of not receiving proper equipment, and that's a result of the political people who are in political power who did not finance the military. Uh, since the current president took over, he essentially intentionally gutted purchase of military equipment and so on since 2019. Before that, the previous president was also corrupt and misusing it, like sort of spending on his own pet projects in the military field. So also extremely inefficient, terrible use. So it's since 1991 when Ukraine got independence, it was basically living off this Soviet stockpile and not doing anything to replace it, right? So that's a result of that policy of the past 30 plus years where nothing has been done. And even in the face of war, very clear, how's it called? Clear and present danger since, let's say, April of 2021. Nothing, even then, nothing has been done in those almost a year of time where you can, go and purchase, military equipment and so on. It still was spent on, building roads or, all other things except for preparing country and military for successfully defending it. And even right now, if you would like to start a business building military equipment, you will not be able to do it. It's prohibited. It's government monopoly, and essentially, that really this is completely backwards policies in Ukraine, and that's part of the reason uh, why it costs so much in human lives in Ukraine. Mm, and if this is not going to be changed, and maybe the moment of the change, maybe it's might be too late to change at this point, there is chance that Ukraine will have some sort of problems on the battleground, and I will explain why that could be possible. Because right now Ukrainian political leadership is basically not doing anything to organize production of the weapons inside of the country. All they do is just go around and beg for the weapons around the world, right? And most of it is just they want to even get for free. They don't even try to buy, because if you pay money, you can get things in this world. Money is the best key to pretty much anything in terms of trade, right? But even then, there is no desire. And as I discussed before, the person who runs this purchases of the weapons is uh, basically a creature of Andrei Yermak, who allegedly has ties to Russian FSB and KGB, and essentially uh, could be, again, could be allegedly Russian agent or influencing Ukrainian situation from within. So again, going back to this, it's not hard to make weapons against all of this Shahid 136, against Orlan 10. It's Ukraine has potential, right? Ukraine has still has enough educated people despite of a lot of wrong policies and some industrial facilities at this point. There's not much left, but there is still some, and there is still electricity despite all of this attack. So again, even if we look at World War II, right, it would take Soviet Union sometimes like 6 months, less than a year to create completely new tank from scratch or new, cannon or whatever, right? So it could be done in like literally 6 months. Yes, it wasn't perfect, but at the same time, it just tells that the country is not mobilized and not doing right things to survive. Let's put this way, and these attacks are will continue. First of all, Russian side is extremely persistent, and Ukraine does not have anything to respond to those Shahid 136 with exception of obviously shooting at them with AK-74, which is sometimes actually works, sometimes in most cases it does not actually. So and then why sort of I mentioned that that reliance on this idea that West will flood Ukraine with weapons is extremely flawed and extremely dangerous, for several reasons. First of all, the military-industrial complex in the West is absolutely monopolized, and as a result of that, everything costs a lot, and it leads to like huge lead times. So essentially, they don't have incentive to produce. So this is again to one of my previous videos where I mentioned about this sort of you know concentration, lack of competitiveness. So this like monocultures where a handful of the companies control everything, and they have no incentive to increase production or to innovate or figure out how to do it cheaper, right? And for that reason, if you look at the weapons or weapon systems in the West, they are extremely expensive relative to what they deliver, right? So this is actually could be a problem down the road if there is hot war with China, because that's where it's all very, very much leading to. Because if you, for those who may have missed the news, essentially U.S. Established export controls for semiconductor manufacturing equipment, so essentially to China. So basically, what this really means, it's a sanctions. It just without any explanations, just like okay, we put export control, so U.S. companies cannot sell semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China, right? And not only that, but U.S. Nationals cannot work there as well. So it's complete sort of like cut off of excess of Chinese industry to semiconductor manufacturing processes, right? Maybe they can buy those sort of more primitive ones that's more sort of readily available around the world, but more advanced ones, um, they essentially prohibited. And this was basically without any explanation, um, without anything, and it was kind of disguised as export control, but really it's a sanctions. Um, and we can and this sanctions essentially happening um, during the what's it called meeting of the Central Committee of Communist Party of China, which is essentially the main decision making body in China, because it's, as everybody knows, it's run by Communist Party, and then Communist Party is run by Central Committee. um, and there is this huge meeting where it's going to be decided who's going to be next leader of China for whatever time. I'm not don't know all details there, but essentially who is going to lead China, and putting those sanctions during that meeting is essentially like putting a slap on the face of this Chinese committee, right? So what they do in response, then the press secretary of that committee comes out and says that military action against Taiwan is not is possible or is not excluded. It's worded somewhat mildly, but it's very clear signal. Okay, here's our slap in return, and there is actually also economics or attempt to do economic slap. So what essentially China does, the government in China, they a lot of Chinese traders, they purchase natural gas in LNG in US and like on long term basis. So and China doesn't really need that much natural gas because it has huge installed capacity of coal power generation, and it has large deposits of coal. So it has, it totally can survive of coal without really need for natural gas. So what those traders, Chinese traders, were doing, they were actually, and because the price of natural gas is so high in Europe and it's highest in the world, so they basically were reselling at pretty good profit U.S. natural gas to Europe. So what Chinese government said, okay, traders stop reselling to Europe. So that's attempt to do sort of return slap, right? If it's not even hitting US, it's still hitting US allies. So we can see that it's essentially is two blocks are being formed, where one is, one member, which is Russia, is already in an open hot war. Then Iran is essentially joined it recently with the supplies of those UAVs, because even like Ukrainian government today issued statement and warning to the Iranian government that, you know basically saying like, okay, stop doing it, or else we will whatever prosecute you or whatever. Basically, tasteless threats, which I'm sure will cause a lot of laughs in Iranian government. But nevertheless, they joined, and there are also reports that there are, sorry, not Chinese, Iranian um, uh, expert or trainers on the ground in Ukraine explaining Russian soldiers how to use those UAVs and training them, essentially supervising them. So effectively, you have at this point um, Iran joining the war. And as you can see, this then the third member is China, hasn't joined the war in sort of like formal way, but as you can see, it's heading in that direction. Um, and if you remember, a few days ago, there was a statement issued by Chinese government, or specifically Ministry of Foreign Affairs, urging Chinese citizens to leave Ukraine. Right. So this is very clear signs where everything is going in terms of sort of like viability of this alliance. The strength of it is that all of these countries, Iran, Russia, and China, are land connected. So it's going to be hard to do anything to them in the case of like open military conflict between this between, let's say, West and these countries. So that's because in that case, probably what's going to happen is um, China probably will annex Kazakhstan to create complete like perfect bridge, land bridge between Russia, China, and then Iran as well. So uh, this is obviously, hopefully will never go that way, but this scenario become, the probability of this scenario goes up with every day. And this central committee will sort of finish its meeting at the end of this week. So we will find out who is going to be new Chinese leaders. And essentially, there are two sort of factions there. One is run by the current Chinese president Xi Jinping, and he is representative of sort of like brutal approach, or he's coming from the military background. So that's one side. Um, and then there's another one is sort of softer sort of faction that wants to sort of take over West by soft power through trade, right? By basically creating extreme dependency of the West on China, which to great extent already has been done, right? So it's sort of the progress has been tremendous, right? So let's say it's 80% out of 100 that you need. This is just ballpark. I'm not saying this is exact. So, but then and then there is this more brutal approach, which is like, okay, let's just straight use military force. So this is kind of like what's going on inside of the Chinese government, where uh, basically what's being decided this week, which side sort of will win. So again, once there is a person in charge of China, and obviously we don't know which side will win, uh, China will be probably prepared to join alliance of Russia and Iran, because something similar happened in Russia before Russia, started all of this aggression against Ukraine. Russian president was in quotes re-elected, right? Because there is no real elections in Russia. I mean, hopefully everybody understands that. So he needed sort of to legitimize himself for the new term, and kind of like tell it's not even about people, it's about all of these layers of bureaucrats who need to understand, okay, this person here for the long run, so we need to obey orders. So that's essentially the essence of the process. It's called sort of elections, but this is the meaning of this is to give a signal to all of those sort of verticals down, to kind of say, okay, this is what we need to do. So that's where it's all going. It's definitely not looking great. Oh, and another thing is in Taiwan, there is a clear preparation to do something to the semiconductor manufacturing facilities in case of Chinese invasion. Most likely, probably going to be blown up because there is no way to evacuate those, and there is not enough time, and so on. So there's high chance that they're going to be blown up, which obviously will cause tremendous shortages of the semiconductors around the world. Uh, again, and then related to this, there is a problem in the West because, again, the semiconductor manufacturing is so concentrated, so sort of monopolistic, because Intel is essentially a monopoly. Uh, and because of that, company has zero incentives to actually produce anything or invest. It's just, I would say, best way to describe it, it's too big to be successful. And even it gets all of this money from the U.S. government. It's not going to help because there is no incentive, and that's a problem, because in a way, by giving Intel money, uh, it actually reminds the Soviet system where the government was building all of these behemoths, and they were super inefficient, never achieved anything. It was basically economic disaster that never produced anything that was that was needed for the economy in the quantity and quality and specification that is needed. So this is going to be the same kind of dead end disaster that will not lead to anything, and that's another sort of negative in terms of this situation in case there is this invasion of Taiwan, and the in terms of timing, this action in by the U.S. government clearly shows that this is a sort of like last ditch effort to uh, prevent Chinese military from obtaining um, production capabilities of the semiconductors. So this is not done in a sort of long-term planned way. This is just like uh, ad hoc action just to kind of like slow down somehow, because some of these companies, US companies that have to leave China, they're losing up to like 30% of their annual revenue, right? So the company essentially becomes two-thirds of the company. So that's just kind of tells the level of this. So like it's so drastic, and essentially U.S. government has no choice but to do that, right? So that's the whole where this whole situation goes, and for the same reasons, actually, there is this increase in interest rates done by IRS because there is no sort of other option, because it's not like there is desire to increase the interest rates. It's very clear that they will create a lot of economic pain, but it's just in a way, um, like it's kind of like a situation where you don't control the situation, but circumstances control you, and you're desperate and you need to do something that sort of circumstances tell you to do, which may or may not be good. In general, it is creating a lot of pain, but it is necessary for healing. But the problem is the healing will take long time, and it's going to be extremely painful. Um, but without actually increasing interest rates, effectively, the say market or capitalist economy cannot function, because by having interest rates at zero, where it was the whole world was essentially turned into um, communism. It's not called communism, but effectively, yeah, it is communism by the sort of actual sort of effects of it. Because if you have no value of the money, uh, that's you destroy the money, and that's the first bait, like first sort of first step in the communism. Because the communism means there is no money, everything is collectivized. So again, returning to high interest rates is sort of right step, but because there was so much, say, mismanagement in the process of during the time of low interest rates, there's going to be a lot of tremendous pain, because there was a lot of people economically made a lot of wrong decisions, and it will become very obvious as interest rates rise the magnitude of those wrong decisions, and it's going to be very painful for ordinary people in the economy. Now let's talk a little bit about just quick mentioning about the Russian financial system. At this point, uh, Russian economy is definitely in knockdown, not as bad one as Ukrainian by any means, much better, but still in big knockdown. But the financial system, the times of sort of pristine financial system for Russia are gone, and it's at this point it's it's the beginning of the road to decline, to complete financial disaster for Russia, which also means destruction of the Russian currency, essentially. And destruction of the currency will lead to all sort of shortages, you know, food ration, all kind of horrific things that come with it, essentially. So this is not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen in a month. They have still, um, you know, big sort of savings account. Let's call it this way. So it probably will take quite a bit. Well, not even more than 6 months, probably like a year, on between 6 months and a year. But basically, Russian financial system is out of control, but the sort of spinning towards disaster will be sort of faster with each next iteration, but we're starting at a very slow pace. So it will not be sort of as visible initially, at least not till New Year for sure. Then going back to Belarus, which I mentioned before, that there are some rumblings there. So Belarus government came out with a statement that they can do preemptive strike if they feel threatened by any of its neighbors. And for Belarus, this is kind of like a vague statement. All of its neighbors except Russia are sort of hostile from a Belarus perspective. So, from their perspective, Poland is the most sort of evil and dangerous. Then, Ukraine, some extent, and then also Lithuania is another big enemy there. So, but at the same time, they also made statement that there are only 9,000 Russian troops currently in Belarus, which, as mentioned before, is absolutely not enough to do attack on Kiev, to basically repeat what was done in February, March of this year. So with the sort of danger right now from Belarus is sort of overstated, but the situation needs to be monitored to see where it's going to go down the road. And also, it's possible that this is big game being played by Belarus because they are ally of Russia, and the point of this game is to keep as many Ukrainian military resources tied up to the Belarus border so that they are not used here in the east and southeast and south, so that there is basically not much pressure on the Russian troops, and it basically buys time for the Russian command to refill the ranks of the Russian army. Um, as I mentioned before, very skeptical on the quality of this refill and if it's even going to work. But nevertheless, the Russian command is sort of following the sort of, say, base case scenario where they think everything is going to work out, even though there are many sort of indicators that things are not going to work out. So this is general strategic and update on what's going on. Oh, and then in terms of Ukrainian energy system, these attacks continue. It's If they continue, it's only a question of time because before Ukrainian power supply system will disintegrate into basically separate islands, and it's very clear that Russian command will continue then destroying each separate island essentially until the whole country is in the dark. Um, so again, because the focus of the attacks by Russian by this Shahid 136 and Russian rockets is those interconnectors. Essentially, it's transformers. Most of the focus is actually on 330 kilovolt transformer stations, not 650 kilovolt, but probably they will be attacked later, or there's no clear sort of, we don't have the sort of full plan, but it's very clear that that's if distraction of 330 kilovolt station is not enough, then it's going to be 750. Uh, and then also this also they try to destroy 110 kilovolts. So basically, but the focus is this middle 330. That's just what's going on. And as I mentioned, so far it's Ukraine will not be able to receive anti-air systems in time to stop this distraction. And that's what it looks like so far, because there are huge lead times for anything to receive anything from the West. And as I said, it's not the fault of the West, it's the fault of Ukrainian leadership that created conditions in the country that you actually cannot manufacture anything for self defense, which is completely backwards. So, means that the destruction of the unified electricity distribution system is just only a question of time at this point. Uh, Now, let's switch to the quick walk through the um, battleground, and let's see what's going on there. So we're going to start as always from north and go down in a clockwise fashion. So there is exchange of artillery fire and also this rocket fire, mortar fire along the state border. It's remains somewhat elevated, not terribly quiet there. Now let's look what's going on here on North Lugansk section of the front line. No major changes. The only sort of standard feature that we're seeing these days is this Russian attack attempts here towards Torske Zaporizhya. Sometimes they direct it at Tern. Essentially, this is the idea is to split. You can call it even like Ukrainian bridgehead here into two pieces, and then destroyed all those pieces separately. So far, they're not successful, and it's very clear there's some kind of like level of at least maybe temporary of balance of power where Ukrainian side does not have enough or not ready. Let's put this way, probably not ready to continue offensive, and Russian side received at least something so that defenses are not crumbling and they can hold on for a little bit before more comes, essentially. So we'll see. And again, this is I call it lost opportunities. Actually, it's more like a lost victories, paraphrasing the um, Manstein's book that he wrote after, based on his experiences in World War II. So this is lost victories for Ukrainian side here. Totally missed opportunity. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on the north North Donbass front lines. Things here are pretty much, as I said, broken record. The same Wagner mercenaries continuing their attacks. They were not successful in achieving anything today. It doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of like part of the process. Anything can happen tomorrow or in 2 days and 3 days. So this is just the key point is they continuing actively attacking Ukrainian defensive positions here. So as you can see, the main focus is attacks sort of north of Bakhmut and then like straight south of Bakhmut. As discussed before, the idea is to essentially create salient and around Bakhmut, sort of kind of like outflank it and force withdrawal from Bakhmut by Ukrainian troops. Now let's quickly look at the central Donbass front line. Things here also very similar. It was a little bit more active day. Again, never-ending attacks from the Pesky salient by Russian side. Then attacks here in Marinka area and this Novomykhailivka and northeast of Avdiivka. So just standard location. They essentially never change by the Russian troops, Russian command. No meaningful success. Maybe they gained 50 meters, but it's impossible to sort of track any of that information. Now let's quickly look at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are stable and no essential changes. As you know, for a while there were no changes here. Let's look at Kherson bridgehead. Things here are also well quiet in a way that there is no active Ukrainian offensive here. Apparently, there is some kind of regrouping, preparing of Ukrainian troops. Continued attacks against their logistical infrastructure. Doesn't look that they are as successful as they used to be. So again, this is something that's achievable by Ukrainian troops. In some way, I would even call it like low-hanging fruit that Ukrainian side can win relatively easily if things are done the right way. But unfortunately, it's just gonna take, as I said, 1,000 cuts before it's gonna get done. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.